Sarap, no? Pero di masarap pag ikaw ang pinapakuluan.
Due to climate change, ocean temperatures increase, which affects everything.
Ocean acidity, storm intensities.
Us, you. But unlike us, you can do something about it.
Join Globe and Partners as they respond to the climate crisis.
At its core, innovation and creativity are what fuel startups. Startups exist to solve problems and change how things are done. Ride sharing, food deliveries, online shopping, these are also commonplace nowadays. We almost forget that only a decade or so ago, a founder encountered a problem, and the eureka moment that came after became the inspiration for the startup. I'm Patricia Mirasol, and I report for Business World. Today, let's hear from three speakers as they share their own innovation stories. After, let's talk more about innovation, creativity, technology, and how both the private and public sectors can better support the startup ecosystem to propel the country forward. Our first speaker is Ms. Katrina Rausa Chan, Executive Director of Kubo Innovation Hub and Idea Space Foundation Incorporated. Ms. Chan concurrently serves as the Executive Director of Kubo Innovation Hub, a public-private initiative which she launched in 2016 to develop the Philippines' startup ecosystem. She also serves at IdeaSpace, a pioneering corporate accelerator and early stage fund backed by the MVP Group. She leads one of the most active startup enablers in the country and has worked with over 150 partners to accelerate the growth of a combined network of over 500 Filipino startup ventures across various stages and industries. Good morning, Ms. Chan.
Good morning, Patricia. Happy to be here. Um, I'll just give a quick self intro and provide my thoughts on today's topic. But again, thank you, Business World, for inviting me to share insights on this particular topic. So, startups are very close to my heart. I guess I'm the executive director of the Idea Space Foundation. So, the startup landscape was very different when we were established. Just about 10 years ago now. I actually started there as I guess a volunteer slash intern. You know, and you know, at that time, like the startup ecosystem was like wild west, right? There was very little awareness even of like what startups were or um what they do, right? And even that largely remains true today. I wouldn't say that like a well-intentioned parent would wish for their kids like, hey, they should risk it all and start a startup, right? But um, that being said, we at the Idea Space at Idea Space we've run or we're currently running our ninth accelerator cohort now, and through that program, I've had the privilege of, meeting, working with, investing in even like, over 100 startups already. And then 5 years ago, I also helped launch this organization called Cuba Innovation Hub, which is named after the Bahay Cuba, right? It stands for Bayanihan. It's actually a public-private initiative with the DOST, the DTI, as well as JP Morgan, and now over, I'd say, 200 partners. Working together to enhance startups, like help them grow, and help them realize their dream. Um, I suppose the prompt that we were given for this talk, and I'm excited to get the thoughts of our fellow panelists, is, really challenging the notion of like whether Filipinos or the Philippines is maximizing its innovation and creative potential. Um, the the quote here was, that or some, like according to this sort of brief that we were given, right, that the Philippines underperforming in terms of new tech, in terms of, you know, limited information, weak capacity of companies, poor employee skills, and lack of government support. Like these were the sort of challenges that were laid out in the prompt, right? And I suppose when I think about it, I wouldn't say that's entirely untrue. Like there are definitely still a lot of challenges that we need to face and we're looking to address as ecosystem enablers. But at the same time, you know, I'd be hard pressed to, I mean, based on my own experience working with so many founders, right? Like I do also see the resilience, the discarte, right? The things that Pinoys are known for, problem solving, and that has definitely come to fore with the COVID crisis. I would say like the startups, they were the first to step up to, again, try to problem solve, to come up with new solutions to turn, you know, calamansis into calamansi juice. I don't know what the equivalent is in the Philippines, right? But and that's something that we're looking to support as an organization as well. So you know, I guess we, among other things, we run the Philippine Startup Week. That was another kind of, again, testament to just how much the startup ecosystem has grown. In terms of fundraising, like they were saying, like just in the first half of 2021, like we've kind of outpaced like our last 4 years of kind of private fundraising on the startup ecosystem. And even internally, right, like we've conducted over 200 programs, like even the best participation among especially like non-NCR and women, jumping from just under 20% to now over 51%, like kind of attending events like that are women. So and many other examples, right? That I mean, I think I have a minute left to speak, but I do think that not only is, like crises and difficult times have always been a catalyst for innovation, for creativity, and again, we always put our own twist to it, as Pinoys, but I do see like that this is an inflection point for growth, and there's so many things that are still left to do, right? Like, so we're not just talking about weathering or surviving now, but really looking at how do we, go into the next chapter post pandemic as an even stronger country, and how that will be led by the innovations that we create here in the Philippines. So yeah, really looking forward to this discussion with the panel, and thanks for having me again.
All right. Thank you for that, Ms. Chan. Our second speaker is Mr. Luis Sia, co-founder and chief commercial officer of PayMongo. A serial entrepreneur, Mr. Sia was only 24 when he co-founded PayMongo in 2019. He is now its chief commercial officer. As PayMongo's CCO, he leads the implementation of strategies to ensure that the company meets its growth goals and, in turn, helps grow the internet economy of emerging markets. Before PayMongo, he established Altitude Technologies, which is one of the top retailers for drones in the Philippines. He was also the exclusive distributor of various photo related brands. Good morning, Mr. Sia.
Thanks for having me, Patricia. And yes, super glad to be here with Kat and Carlo. So yeah, perhaps I can get started and introduce PayMongo a bit. So my name is Luis. I'm one of the co-founders of PayMongo. In a nutshell, PayMongo builds tools so Filipinos can get paid and succeed online, right? And just to give you guys some background, PayMongo started when my co-founders and we were a bunch of entrepreneurs and engineers, but many times we tried to set up businesses on the internet. And in our experiences of doing that over the years of us launching different projects, we realized that the most basic thing to do when you set up a business is to get paid. And at the time, just 3 years ago when we started, it was very hard to get integrated with the banks or other existing players because not a lot of or there wasn't really a company catering to the underserved market, which means the MSMEs, your mom and pop stores selling on Facebook and Instagram. It was very hard for them to accept the most basic forms of online payments. Um, and this frustration is essentially what made us decide to try and build something that could solve that problem for ourselves. So we were really sort of like the first users for what ended up to become PayMongo. And our goal back then was really just to build different tools so that it would be easy for entrepreneurs. Whether you're a small business just selling on Instagram, Facebook, or to your friends on Viber, to larger scale businesses, we wanted it to be easy for them to accept payments online. And that's what led us to launching products like our suite of products right now. Our core business revolves around payments. And the first product that we launched in 2019 was a product called Payment Links. It's a no code product, which means you need no knowledge of how to build a website or how to code so that you can use it. You just need to press a button on your dashboard, send it over to your customer, and you can collect payments via different payment methods, right? Since then we've launched products like payment pages, our APIs, which support more customized workflows in terms of accepting payments, plugins for those who use different e-commerce platforms as well. And we build our platform such that it's easy to integrate, no matter if you're a developer or someone who has never touched a line of code in your life. And our philosophy in doing this is that so businesses can really focus on what they're really good at. I don't think that businesses should all be an expert in how to run online payments. They should focus on their business, which is what what everyone brings on the table when they join the internet economy. And
Mhm.
so from when we launched our first suite of products in 2019, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
And this was really also an inflection point in the company, because we saw overnight how many businesses had to shift online. You're talking about
Mhm.
brick and mortar restaurants, traditional retailers who had never even considered selling online in the decades that they existed, and just in the snap of a finger, had to shift their business or a majority of their business online. And we
Mhm.
saw how much of a role we played for a lot of these businesses that we helped out. We were able to help them transition their business by offering them the suite of products that made it easy to sell to their customers. And from there on, we realized that what we wanted to build was, with payments as a starting point, is really to provide more and more financial services that could potentially help anyone with a great idea or with a great business, help them so that they can succeed online, right? If anything, like the pandemic really reinforced the idea that Filipinos are indeed entrepreneurial. They really do find different ways to survive,
Mhm.
and that in itself, I think, is really inspiring. And our goal is that anyone with an idea, whether you're just starting out, um, you're an individual seller, or might have goals of scaling a large business, all of them shouldn't have any barriers to bring their business online, right? And our goal is to provide them with tools such as that allow them to accept payments online and other financial services, so
Mhm.
that the only barrier really is their execution. And yeah, so it's definitely been a interesting and very inspiring journey,
Mhm.
working so closely with different types of businesses, especially focusing on how things have shifted
Mhm.
just in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
And we're super bullish about how more and more Filipinos will join the internet economy. It's now the
Mhm.
fastest growing in Southeast Asia,
Mhm.
and we're so excited to find ways on how we could better support that, and the entrepreneurs in their journey of joining the internet economy. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Sia. I totally agree with both you and Ms. Chan that Filipinos are resilient and that this crisis is an inflection point for growth. Our third speaker is Mr. Carlo Calimon, the president and CEO of Startup Village. Mr. Calimon is the director of Let's Go, or the Leading Entrepreneurs Towards Seizing Global Opportunities Foundation, a nonprofit, non-stock organization advocating entrepreneurship. He is also a mentor for entrepreneurs, especially startups, in Startup Village, the newest incubator and accelerator in the Philippines, where he serves as a director. Aside from being an advocate of entrepreneurship, he is also a co owner of several companies, mostly focused on innovation, training, food, and various services. Good morning, Mr. Kalimon.
Good morning, Patricia, and hello to all of our viewers and my co-panelists. Happy to be here. Just a quick background, I've been in the entrepreneurship space for the past 16 years, mostly as an advocate for entrepreneurship through education. One of the things that we were able to do was we were the ones who integrated entrepreneurship into the national high school curriculum. So we were the ones who created the frameworks that DepEd is now using for all public and private high schools all around the country. And we did this between 2006 to 2009, actually, even extending up to 2012. Simultaneously, I also teach entrepreneurship. I used to teach in several universities, and I go all around the country teaching in the grassroots level entrepreneurship as well, whether it's mind setting, product development, marketing, digital marketing, business development, and the like, and digitization. Um, I'm also an entrepreneur myself. I'm a startup founder. And things have come full circle with the formation and starting of Startup Village. Startup Village is an incubator and accelerator similar to Kubo and Idea Space. So that's why happy to see Kat here as well. We work together in helping develop the startup ecosystem here in the Philippines through our various initiatives. And for Startup Village, our objective is really to find the next generation of innovators and disruptors, even from the very early age. So through
Mhm.
Startup Village, we actually find people who are just beginning, whether they have that itch to become entrepreneurs, or they have this basic idea, and we want to make sure that they start off properly, because at the end of the day, we believe that it takes a lot of entrepreneurs to really develop and bring the country up, right? So that's why we wanted to create an army of entrepreneurs, as we say it. In the process, we've created several programs, whether it's a startup program, we have pitching programs, and also we also conduct immersion trips in various countries of innovation. Prior to the pandemic, we used to go to Silicon Valley all the time, around twice a year, bringing entrepreneurs, startups, corporate executives, students to the valley, so that we can learn from our counterparts, not just take photos of these wonderful places, but really interact, talk to, listen, and learn to people from Facebook, Google, and other companies, and bring that culture and those learnings back here to the Philippines, so that we can help develop the ecosystem further. In addition, just recently, we just launched a new program called Project Match. Project Match is an 18-month activity and initiative developed by Startup Village, but funded by USAID. And the objective is very much aligned to the topic for this morning, is to connect startups to MSMEs, because we understand that startups bring all this innovation and technology that is needed by these MSMEs, so that they can adapt to the changing environment and to the new norm, as we call it, right? And normally, startups have the challenge of getting traction and going to market because of limitations. But at the same time, MSMEs have been clamoring for all of these innovation, especially due to the pandemic. So, what better way than to really match them and bring them together, so that they can, that this point of convergence can allow them to grow and prosper at the same time. So Project Match is it's like a marketplace platform, and we augmented that with learning resource portion, where uh, those who register into Project Match can receive free training, learning sessions, webinars, panel discussions, and also free mentorship. And also, there is another aspect on access to finance, which allows them to find the necessary resources to further grow, whether it's from banks, financial institutions, microfinance, angel investors, or even venture capitalists and the like. Now, going into this topic today, I agree with what has been said by my co-panelists. You know, uh, Filipinos are, as you mentioned, very resilient, but at the same time, they're very entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
even if our training has always pointed us towards employment. But you could see that it is in us to be entrepreneurial. I think it's just a matter of giving people a chance to actually experience it and execute it, because you would see the entrepreneurial mindset to be present even when a person is employed. So what more if you're able to do it for yourself by starting your own venture, by starting your own startup, right? But I think that something that limits us is the fact that we become too comfortable, right? We become stagnant because we do not want to change. In essence, remember, we as people, we become creatures of habit, right? And our mindset is, why do we need to innovate? Why do we need to change things when it's still working? And the only time when we actually adjust is when we encounter
Disruption.
crisis, or
Yeah.
disruption, similar to what
Yeah.
the pandemic
Yeah.
has brought us. It takes something like that to rattle us, to take us out of our comfort zones. It forces us. But if you look at the way innovative companies or innovative ecosystems have done it, they don't wait for that to happen. There is that
Mhm.
mindset, that behavior of constantly, continuously innovating because they understand that by the time you encounter these situations, it might be too late because somebody else may have started doing this already. Like, for example, if we look at the pandemic, we take a look at e-commerce, we take a look at work from home and things like that, which was already being utilized and which is prospering already in other markets, but now it's like we're just playing catch up, right?
Yeah.
So I think that we need to remove ourselves from being just creatures of habit into putting innovation and our creativity into practice, into play, even without these situations. We need to apply this on a daily basis. And essentially, being entrepreneurial doesn't mean you're an entrepreneur, but having that entrepreneurial behavior should be a part of our daily lives.
Mm. All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Kalimon. I think it's very interesting what you said about putting our creativity into play even without disruptions. That's the $1 million challenge. Okay. So, thank you very much, everyone, for all those inspiring opening statements. I'd like to start our discussion with a question about technology, and I'd like to throw it to Mr. Kalimon. Technology is helping keep our economy afloat this pandemic. How are Filipinos utilizing technology nowadays to change their business models and thus the business landscape?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that now is the time when Filipinos are really embracing technology, right? Embracing the utilization of digital, and this is when companies are embracing digitalization. And then, like what I mentioned earlier, it actually took a pandemic, right, to force us into it, right? Work from home, as I mentioned, or even utilizing online payments, such as what Paymong was doing, or even just working with a startup, right? I think that the nice thing about the pandemic is that people were forced to adapt to the situation and embrace using technology. To be upfront, you would see this very openly. Like, for example, people before, they didn't want to do online shopping. Why? Because they were apprehensive. And remember, prior to the pandemic, and if you look all around you, there's a mall within 2 to 3 kilometers within striking or walking distance from your respective homes, and behavior would normally be it's a social activity, you would go to the mall and so on, right? So people didn't really do online shopping that much, but because of the pandemic, because we were forced to stay at home, people started tinkering with it, right? And they were forced to get into it. And to be honest, even the providers, e-commerce platforms were also forced to improve the product so that uh, individuals, the regular Filipino, can have access to it. In the same fashion that online learning was not really utilized that much, but we're embracing it, and the next generation has is becoming more comfortable with this. But it doesn't mean that it's perfect, which
Yeah.
opens the doors for more innovation and more disruption. I think that technology has always been around. I think that we just took it for granted, or we just never really got into it because we never really had to, right? But now, since we have to, right, I think people just have no choice. But given that we are already in this situation and the future is pointing towards really incorporating technology in our lives, businesses should all do the same. And I think that is what everybody's preparing for, regardless of whether or not we progress towards a more open lifestyle with COVID, or whatever the case may be. But it is already a part of our daily habit, a part of our daily lives, and at the end of the day, it's just about embracing all of these changes that's happening around us.
Thank you for that. I do feel that moving forward, we're not going to travel or shop or we're not going to learn the same way as before. We're not going, but there's no going back to the old normal. Talking
Just to
more,
add, sorry,
yes,
Patricia. Just to add,
go on.
I think that right now it's like saying that we were forced to focus on technology as part of our daily lives. Then in the coming months or coming year, it's going to be a combination of it's going to be a hybrid between our previous lives without technology, but now mixing it up, right? Traditional with digital.
Yes. Yes, I keep hearing that word a lot: hybrid workplaces, hybrid learning. I agree with you. Talking a bit more about technology, there's a growing adoption of technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the cloud. When founding a company nowadays, is it critical to use these specific technologies from the very start? Mr. Sia?
Sure. Yeah. When it comes to these sort of terms, no, I think what entrepreneurs should really focus on is how they can provide value for their customers. No, because rather than focusing on the technology itself and working forward from the technology, most often than not, the value is created by realizing certain insights about users, about your customers, and the technology is there to support however ways that you build it. No? So I think rather than focusing on what these are, it's really good to be aware of how AI and machine learning, for example, work and how they could potentially be applied. But at the end of the day, the value comes from entrepreneurs really looking into markets, finding how they can solve certain problems, and these technologies are there in support of what they want to build, right? So I definitely agree, Patricia. It's good to be aware of these terms, but also us being Filipinos and us knowing our market locally, I think it's really best that we think about what value and what problems are left to solve in the country. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Sia. I agree with you that it all goes back to focusing on the customer and what they really need. Okay. Moving on to the roles of the public and private sectors, how can they help foster an environment that enables innovation amongst companies? Ms. Chan.
Yeah. Well, I think the role of the role of the public and private sectors, right? Like it almost there's a different mix that you see in each geography or maybe like the different cultural context that you work in, right? But at the end of the day, like the question is, you know, I think it's undisputed that there are so many, Filipinos that not only have the ideas but have the big problems to solve, right? The passion to do it. And the question is, what do you need to be able to do that? And I guess you know the private sector is really there to not only serve as maybe customers but also provide the capital, right? Provide partnerships. And the same goes with the government. Like I think the challenge for the government on one hand is to make sure that these opportunities are accessible to everyone, and that again that that if you do have a promising kind of startup or creative endeavor that you want to pursue, that there is an opportunity for you to be able to grow and to scale. So yeah, I mean, again, like a big part of what we do is to bring together these resources and to make them accessible for startups. It's not one without working with the other, right? Doesn't work. And Carlo, for example, mentioned that a few of the kind of things that have become essential, right? And it's sort of work, the not only the necessity driving it, but that for example, like to once people get used to a certain thing, right, you can't undo or like unlearn a lot of the behaviors, right? So I think most of our lolos and titas are already kind of using, let's say, watching content through streaming or buying things online, or like no longer kind of lining up the banks, right, through our fintech kind of partners. And you're seeing this across the board, right? Whether it's in agriculture, it's in online learning, gaming, like I think lots of talk or chatter these days about, let's say, the Axis and the NFTs, right? And how tricycle drivers are kind of doing this as a side hustle. But I think, for example, so the public sector, right, like has a big role in making sure, say, the infrastructure, the enabling environment is there. They empower a lot of, let's say, technology-based incubators for small business ideas. They ensure that ease of doing business is there, or that access to talent is available, not only through good education, let's say, making it easy for talent to kind of diffuse into the country and things like that. And then for the private sector, at the end of the day, like, I mean, it's about really kind of realizing shareholder value and like achieving business goals. And I think we're seeing this around the world, right? Startups and tech and innovation, it's no longer just like a fun hobby kind of side thing, a very niche thing. It's really become almost a necessity for, both traditional companies or long-standing kind of institutions, as well as new kind of players, right? That have kind of caused massive disruption the last kind of not just decade, but 20 years, right? So to really embrace and invest in like not just new technologies per se, but as Luis was talking about, right, like having a continuous eye on solving problems that are relevant to today and like kind of creating the solutions for that. And that's important to stay relevant. So I think you know there is incentives all around, but also each institution, right, it doesn't work unless sort of everyone kind of plays a role in building up the ecosystem and like promoting the kind of the development, right, of these various companies. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I actually have a follow-up question for you, Ms. Chan. How can
Sure.
the Philippines develop itself as a regional hub of technological innovation? Is that possible?
Of course. I mean, I think I think we all wouldn't be here if we didn't believe that to be the case, right? So, the Philippines has so many kind of ingredients to become again, an engine for driving innovation, right? So they're the demographic things, right, that we hear about a lot in the studies. So you know like the right age group and the talent pool, the generally kind of growing economy, like the willingness to adopt technologies and use them, broadly speaking, right? So these are all great things, but like I think again at the end of the day, like there are more places in the world that look like the Philippines and Palo Alto, right? So when you think about like how solving the next big billion-dollar problems out there, I think being able to kind of thrive in the midst of constraints, like again maybe slower internet or stuff like that, right? Being able to overcome some of these things is definitely one advantage, right? So if it works here, there's a potential for it to work in many other places. Talent is also a huge thing, right? Like I think that's the fuel that drives any startup. And I have such a massive belief in the ability of Filipinos. Like, I think around the world we've proven ourselves to be able to execute in companies around the world, right? But like so there's it's definitely just a question of like how do we kind of create those companies here, right? And attract the talent here. And I think that's something that we're already starting to see with locally founded companies. And also the hype machine, so to speak, right? So it's not just about us believing in ourselves, but getting investors and sort of the broader community, the public, right, to believe in what we're doing, to actually invest here. Again, I mentioned this in my opening, right? Like I think we've seen record breaking numbers in terms of investments. The local adoption in terms of us actually using our own kind of developed solutions as definitely accelerated. And you know I think there are a few other things that are still missing. I won't lie, right? Like
Yeah.
in terms of the regulatory environment, maybe, and like again the infrastructure piece, and some work that still needs to be done, even the investment side, right? But absolutely, I think we can position ourselves as a hub, like not only as a market, but as a creator of technologies, for many because of many factors, and yeah, very bullish about this.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ms. Chan. I do remember what you mentioned in your opening statement that in the first half of 2021, fundraising outpaced the last 4 years. So that's a positive development. Mr. Kalimon, would you like to add your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I agree definitely with Kat, right? Yeah, the Philippines, I believe, is ripe. It can be a hub of innovation, and I think that's the reason why Kat and I have been also working in through our respective organizations, Startup Village, Kubo Idea Space, along with other similar entities all around, because we believe that the Philippines is capable of doing so. Otherwise, we all saw the opportunity, so why put in more effort in it if we don't believe that it's bound to happen? And I think over the years, since Kat and I, we've been working with each other in this ecosystem for years, along with so many other people. I believe that we're seeing that trend already right now, and as Kat mentioned, with investments coming in, you could actually see that trend wherein other players from other countries, investors, and even corporations are now looking at the ecosystem for these kinds of innovation. And some VCs that I've talked to have actually said that the Philippines currently looks like what India was 5-10 years ago, or Indonesia was 5 years ago. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and I think it's just us continuing to work towards the faster growth and development of the ecosystem as a whole. And I also believe that we can be, because we have all of these new initiatives, especially from government, that support us. Though I agree with Kat, there are still some things that we need to definitely work on. But the OST, the ICT, and DTI have all of these nice programs, especially with the Philippine Startup Act and the Philippine Innovation Act, that will allow us, right, to move forward and truly become a hub. I think we're getting there. We've already began that journey. The foundation has been set. I think we just need to ride the wave and push some more.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you also for mentioning the Innovative Startup Act of 2019. I hear that. I was talking to an AI consultant earlier this week, and he said that when it comes to the law, it's best in class practices. It's just that the tricky thing is in the execution of the programs. He said that if the programs aren't executed in a timely manner, the programs might atrophy. So that was his note about the law. Okay, so I'd like to mention a shining star in the startup ecosystem, Mint. Mint is the company that powers Gcash, one of the most popular e-wallets here in the Philippines. It's also the country's first unicorn. It made waves last month when it fundraised more $300 million. My question is, how can innovators and startups learn from the successes of Mint? Mr. Sia?
Sure, like I think if anything, Mint or the story of Gcash is inspiring and should be inspiring for entrepreneurs, because it was not built overnight. Gcash has been there for quite a while now, and it took years and years to really get to where they are today. I think the latest that I saw is that they've reached over half the population in terms of those with access to Gcash wallet. And it really took several inflection points for them to reach that to be that ubiquitous in the market, right? Building these unicorns or these large startups really are a long-term game. And I think Gcash was able to really consistently innovate, and uh, and build on top of their product. I think it's quite inspiring to see how far they have gone. So it's something definitely to be proud of. Um, I guess secondly, I think when we look at Gcash, it really speaks to building for the underserved market in the Philippines. What Gcash does in essence is that they cater to a lot of underserved Filipinos who are not able to have access to the same financial services as those who are banked. And because of this app, and I think they still have a long way to go here, is that they're able to provide services like loans, credit, and different services that otherwise Filipinos wouldn't have easy access to. And I think that mindset is really important. It's easy to get caught up in sort of your everyday, but if you realize the population of the Philippines and how many Filipinos are still not part of the formal economy or the internet economy or have access even to basic financial services, there are tons of billion-dollar opportunities there, and Gcash happens to be one of those companies that is keen on bridging a lot of those gaps.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Sia. I love that you mentioned the underserved market because I feel that the more ordinary Filipinos digitally adopt and get on the e-wallets bandwagon, the more of a level playing field we will have. All right. Now let's move on to our audience Q&A. Our audience has sent in a few questions. I'd like to read them one by one. Here's the first one that came in. The question is, with the elections coming up next year, what new policies do you want to see implemented? This is for anyone who would like to
Um,
take a stab at
yeah,
it.
maybe I'll take a stab at it, right? I think that it's not just a matter of new policies, but also consistency in the policies. We all know, I mean, Luis knows, Kat knows, right, that there's still a lot of challenges that startup face from the ease of doing business side. Or it has improved, but there's still a gap, or challenges with taxation, or even just basic local government policies. Anything that helps enable and makes it easier for a startup to start or maybe fail, or just to operate, would be good for the startup. But it doesn't have to be something on a national level, but a lot of it can also be on a local level that allows innovation to be tested, right? To be executed. Like for example, remember a few years back when there was a food truck craze because of
Yeah.
that movie, right? So people started putting up food trucks.
Yeah.
But have you actually seen a food truck parked at the back of a building? No, right? You don't see them moving around. Where do you see food trucks? You see them, right, at events or at a
Mm-hmm.
party. So
Yeah.
how come they're not functioning the way they're supposed to function? Simple. Because when you apply for a permit, the LG will say, "I'm sorry, you cannot operate." Why? Because you don't fall under any category,
Mm.
right? So how can you now test it? That's a simple example. But what more for a startup who has something new and disruptive, right? That they cannot even execute and sell to be used by real people, right? So there has to be that provision or a policy, or that allows for these things to be tested. Otherwise, you're killing the startup before they actually start, because they're not able to test their products, they're not able to gain traction, and then eventually they're going to run out of money and they can't even attract an investor, no matter how good the idea is. So I think that there has to be more policies that really support the entrepreneurial cycle, especially in the beginning stages, when you know starting up is already difficult. Running a startup in the early stages without funding, or while you're bootstrapping, is already difficult. Then all of these restrictions are falling on your lap, and eventually you're just gonna give up, right? At the same time, also, I've always wanted to see an ease of closing down a business policy. right? Because especially when you're starting out, there's no guarantee that you're gonna succeed. So we're being encouraged to what they call this, register our businesses, and when we do, but when we fail, right, it's so expensive for us to even shut it down,
Very true.
right? So it would be great to have policies that really make things easier for us to start and to fail. But it goes beyond just the national level. Obviously, there are still national issues from that level that have to be addressed. But I think that there has to be local support, authentic local support. And it cannot be tied up to just, an election, to be honest. It has to be an ongoing thing. Somebody has to start it, but somebody has to continue it. It shouldn't be something that, okay, just because you know how it is, right? When the next person comes in, everything is crap, right? So I think that there has to be continuity, right? From an implementation perspective, not just it's not about new policies all the time. It's about consistency, and maybe just fine tuning and improving the previous policies that are already in place. And as you mentioned, right, execution is key. So no matter what law you have, if you don't execute it properly, it doesn't really amount to much.
Okay.
Absolutely agree with Carlo. I think execution is key, and especially at the local level. And there's still so much sort of untapped potential, especially outside of the big metro areas. Even just like a basic awareness, right, of how government can be involved. I think what I do want to add, maybe at the national level, although this is a bit different, right? Is I do want to see that in our future leaders that they take innovation and startups and even supporting small businesses and their sort of path to digitization, not just as a nice kind of side dish talking point, but as a real national priority. I think in countries that have really executed a strong kind of innovation policy, like in the US, in France, in even Malaysia and Singapore, like closer to home, right? They have dedicated ministries that are just thinking about startups and innovation, right? Like there's real money being invested. When you think about government as probably one of the biggest spenders, right, in the economy. It's almost impossible to find a government agency that will actually buy a product or let procurement happen for a startup. I would love to be able to pay my taxes using Paymongo, for example, or something like that, right? And the thing is, the solutions are already there. They've been created, but like there's hesitation to adopt them. And I think you know as much as the grassroots and the bottoms up, I believe, is super essential as well. Like there has to be that strong kind of direction or political will, right, from top down as well, to say like, hey, we're gonna use Filipino tech, we're gonna adopt this innovation, we're gonna give it a try, like we're gonna even the
Wow.
sandbox sort of like ideas, right? you know I just hope sometimes I hear it's like it's almost not even about new policies or incentives, but just I wouldn't say getting out of the way, but at least letting the startups kind of figure it out, right? Like, and being there to support them. I think that's also quite critical, and I would love to see that in a future leader, right? Like that sort of mindset and thinking, and putting importance into supporting this space. So yeah.
To
Wow.
add
Thank
to
you. Yeah.
what Kat said, I think also just to add, it somebody just has to start it, and it should be a part of our behavior, right? We shouldn't, to be honest. I mean, what we're doing right now is just basically beginning the conversation, so that people can pick it up. But after it's picked up, it should be a part of their habit already, right? Um, and I think that's what's missing. As Kat mentioned in other occasions, they embrace all of these new things, right? But for us, um, we still go back to the traditional, right? We don't embrace these new things. We need to build that habit of embracing these new innovations. Whether it's crazy, it's okay to fail, and it's okay, that if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But at least you tried it. I think that's something that is missing, that is not encouraged even from an LGU or a local perspective. And there's a lot of legislation that and policies that are linked to that, and even education for that matter, right? It has to start from somewhere, and it's not. as Kat will know, it's just one piece, right? There's multiple pieces that have to be fixed.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Kalimon and Ms. Chan. I feel that it needs all of the things you mentioned needs visionary mindset and lots and lots of political will. Mr. Sia, would you like to add to anything?
No, I think Kat and Carla
Okay.
summed it up perfectly. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'll direct the next question to you. The next question is startups and innovations are mostly tech inclined. How can companies address the challenge of the high demand in developers, considering there's a low supply of them in the country?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is a real problem. But I think, also in relation to the previous question, and I think Carlo touched on this a bit. I am a strong believer that we should be teaching more and more Filipinos at even basic educational levels, how to code, and about the technology. I think this is it really is a skill of the future. Is being done in many other countries, and it's really something that will become very important in having young kids anywhere participate and be part of the internet economy, right? So I think feel very strongly about that, and I think the government also has a part to play here, in making sure that we're able to give people the opportunity, especially those who may be inclined to get into courses like engineering, which will be very much in demand as we scale the or the internet economy grows over the next 5 or 10 years, right? Second, I think is in relation to just growing the ecosystem of startups in the Philippines. I think one thing that startups need to realize now that more and more are getting funded, as Kat mentioned a while ago, we've seen record-breaking deals this year, is that the role of startups is not only to hire people but also to train them as well, right? That mindset means that for example, in Paymongo, knowing that there is all our developers, by the way, are based or are Filipino currently. We really make it a point to hire also based on their inclination to learn, and not only hiring those who may be able to do the job from day one, right? And so um, like there is definitely a responsibility that would work for the whole ecosystem at the end of the day, for us to train and to take bets on people early on. And if you look at well established ecosystems like Silicon Valley, this is how it works, right? Like when you hire developers or engineers, especially out of college, even if they come from the best schools, the real learning comes from the real world practice. And as startups get funding, raise funding, and are able to scale up their operations, they should also develop programs in which they can train these developers, and eventually like also will benefit the whole ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah, just to jump in, I definitely love what Luis said. Like it's it's about like we're building an ecosystem, right? It doesn't happen overnight, and it does, like the experience that comes from working with a startup. In the business side, it's like some people say it's like joining a startup is like getting, like an accelerated MBA, right? Because you get to work in all aspects of the business. I think same goes with, as a developer, the opportunity to work with a growing tech company is, I would say, unrivaled, right? Like you get to build a product and like go through multiple pivots and iterations. You're not just maintaining some kind of code base, right? But you're actually kind of part of building something awesome. So I absolutely believe that like our startups and the companies that are here today have a big role in kind of growing this sort of talent pool. I do I do want to say that like there is a bit of an aversion also to kind of getting foreign talent, but I don't think that's a weakness necessarily, right? Like we shouldn't be afraid of that because that also does infuse, like new knowledge, new experience into the ecosystem. And in other countries, they make it very easy for you to get like a visa or something if you want to work for a tech company. And even in Paymongo's case, like you went to YC, right, to Y Combinator, one of the world's kind of most prominent tech accelerators, and I'm sure you brought something from there to the Philippines, right, that is helping you grow now. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Like, let's not be afraid to get foreign talent. And then just last quick point. Um, I talked about drum beating or the hype machine. I think the media has a big role to play in this. Like the best and brightest, I don't think right now are already attracted to startups. Like we haven't seen the success stories of someone converting their early stage equity to like millions of pesos, right? Or like the aspiration graduating out of college coming from, I don't know, right, Iloilo, Marawi, wherever, right, it's like, I really want to work at a tech company or something. Like the moment that starts happening, right, like that we're attracted, because I don't know, like when there was like a nursing boom, I don't know, like 5-10 years ago, right, like hundreds of people suddenly started, thousands of people started like taking up this course, so I think the more we build like the interest in our space, there are so many young people like looking and lost in their careers, right? And like I think it's about also attracting them to this space so that our best young minds are developing their skills, in where the jobs are and where the demand is. So I feel like we all have a role to play in making that happen as well.
Yeah, don't worry, Kat. I think the guys from Paymongo will be part of that initial list of
Exactly.
media coverage, right?
I hope so.
But just to add, what they call this, just to emphasize one of what Louis said, that education plays a key role, especially in developing talent, right? I think that education should also adapt faster as well, right? In the same fashion that I remember around 17 years ago when the Philippines leapfrogged Vietnam in terms of curriculum and engineering talent, right? Because of we were just ahead. Now it's the reverse. We're lagging behind because we're still teaching the old stuff, while other countries like Vietnam are teaching the newer stuff, right? So I think that as technology evolves, so does the curriculum, especially from an engineering and computer science perspective, right? It's not as if you're talking about other courses like economics and so on, wherein the principles are the same. Technology evolves and it's evolving very quickly, and the only way we can develop talent is by riding and understanding the changes also, right, in terms of what is required by the market, not just from the maths and the sciences, but coding, engineering, and so on and so forth. In the same fashion, like medicine, right, they're teaching all of these new things as they come out to the next generation of doctors. We should be doing the same thing for our engineers and tech talent moving forward.
Okay. Thank you very much for all those inputs. My key takeaways are: hire based on the inclination to learn. Education should adopt faster, and don't be afraid of the influx of foreign talents. So this was a very enriching discussion, but unfortunately I would have to already end it because we've run out of time. Thank you very much to our speakers for sharing their time and their insights, Mr. Kalimon, Ms. Chan, and Mr. Sia. Many thanks too to our partner organizations, the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, the Management Association of the Philippines, and to our media partner, the Philippine Star. Of course, to everyone who joined us today, thank you very much. Follow Business World's social media pages and be updated on our next projects. Again, this is Patricia Mirasol, and this has been Business World Insights. Good afternoon.
Sinigang? Sarap, no? Pero di masarap pag ikaw ang pinapakuluan.
Due to climate change, ocean temperatures increase, which affects everything.
Ocean acidity, storm intensities,
Us, you, but
Unlike us,
you can do something about it.
Join Globe and partners as they respond to the climate crisis.